The Spanish Inquisition was an expression of religious intolerance and terrible. However, it needs to be addressed that the Spanish Inquisition is probably the most lied about institution. Worst of all, many of those lies continue to be told in museums and in reports.
The Palace of the Inquisition in Cartagena is one of the more elegant representative constructions of the colony. It was established in order to judge the crimes against the Christian faith. And today, there is a museum where they expose the torture chambers where many lives were taken.
What's lives taken? Tortures were to root out confessions, not lives. In not one single case was torture used for killing. In fact, it was required that a doctor be in the room, and often under the supervision of an inquisitor to avoid permanent damage. In regards to many lives being taken, well, it depends on what you consider to be many. Honestly, Cartagena's inquisitorial court condemned less people in all of the Americas. The viceroyalties, los virreinatos, had 3 courts of the Inquisition. The Mexico City one, the Lima one, and the Cartagena one. And between the 3, less than 150 people were killed during the viceregal era, with the Virreinato of Mexico being the one that claimed the most lives with a total of 43. Majority of whom were foreigners and whites. Let's remember that the Inquisition absolutely forbade judging any indigenous person. The Spanish Inquisition was more active in Europe. Inquisitions and intolerances were neither exclusively religious, Catholic, nor Spanish. Protestant and enlightened Europe murdered more people in the name of ideological intolerances than the Spanish Inquisition on several occasions. A fact that has been ignored throughout the years due to Hispanophobia, propaganda, and the law of silence.
Cries, laughter, mockery, and screams of innocent souls. People still live and touch down within the corridors and balconies of the Palace of the Inquisition. Sorcerers, witches, women, and men against the Christian faith were subjected to painful death until their lives were taken.
What witches or sorcerers? Not at all. The Inquisition in the religious field primarily judged false converts and Protestants in America. Never in viceregal history was there a single witch, nor a single sorcerer, nor a single golem who was hanged or burned at the stake.
The Inquisition is after me! Help me!
The only ones who executed witches were the English Puritans in the 13 colonies, never ever in Hispanic America.
Today, the Palace of the Inquisition is considered one of the most historically emblematic and complete museums of the Caribbean.
No one knows where, when, or how man first landed on the moon. But our Fungineers think it might have happened something like this. We're whalers on the moon.
We carry a harpoon.
They were told over and over again to confess the truth, to tell the truth. If they did not confess what they wanted to hear, then the torture would continue hour after hour after hour, until the anesthetic doctor would tell them to stop, and it would start up again after another 24 hours.
Hours and hours? Nope. The Spanish Inquisition had stipulated that each torture session could not last more than 1 hour and 15 minutes.
This was kept a secret. All the prisons of the Inquisition were underground, that way no one would know what would happen.
That is false. No. The Inquisition never hid away. So much so that people came to trials held in broad daylight in public places in front of everyone and burned people. The Inquisition never needed to hide at all, because according to the opinion of the time, it was not doing anything wrong. And it was even a popular court among Catholics.
Everyone would stay indoors, because if the Inquisition was after you, there was no human way out of it. No justice, no reason that could liberate you.
Wrong again. The Inquisition was the most legally protected Western tribunal at the time. It was the least lethal when we compare the number of deaths with its contemporaries. Civil and inquisitorial courts from other countries at the time, if insufficient evidence existed in order to sentence a person, then that person would be acquitted. In fact, the majority of cases were acquitted. The Spanish inquisitorial jails also maintained better conditions than the secular jails in those times. In fact, many people held in civil jails would blaspheme in order to be judged by the Spanish Inquisition and transferred to its jails, which were more humane.
Well, look, here's a museum of the House of the Inquisitor, as was already mentioned, where instruments of torture are shown, and how they were handled by the Dominicans and the executioners. Well, the most notable instruments in regards to the museum are those like the Iron Lady. This was mostly used on women who kept their virginity before marriage.
Pastorama, where old New York comes alive.
It's like stepping back into the year 2000.
Time for the mammoth hunt, kids.
In Spain, people who practiced witchcraft were executed and buried in this fashion: red skirt, white blouse, and black hair, and a rosary between your hands. The tongue would be taken out. That way, after death, if resurrected, they would not be able to continue practicing it. In case this were to occur, their gravediggers would bury them face down. That way, if they scratched through the earth, they would dig themselves into hell.
Without a doubt, a massively disturbing tale, and very well narrated. But there's a problem. It never happened. Once again, never had a single witch been killed by the Spanish Inquisition in Hispanic America. Witchcraft was discarded relatively quickly, being Spain the first country in Europe to leave that superstition behind, while many countries continued executing witches for generations, like the 25,000 who were killed in Protestant Germany, 5 times the total amount of people killed by the Spanish Inquisition. And among the few witches who were executed in Spain before its prohibition, not one was executed in that fashion. The Inquisitor Salazar y Frias pushed for the end of witch burning, and the Spanish Inquisition prohibited it in 1614. The Pope prohibited the burning of witches in 1657.
You could fit 3 to 4 people at the same time. They would tell them that the last person alive would have the opportunity to be free. This would force them to fight among each other until the death or eat the bodies of their colleagues. Either way, that would allow them to die inside. A person still alive would be placed on top of these stakes. Here we have 2 chastity belts. Has anyone heard of these belts? Yes, the church used to have the belief that these belts were not a form of torture nor punishment. However, these belts were seen as a salvation because they would protect the fidelity and virginity that was unique to a woman.
In these so-called Inquisition museums, you will find all kinds of torture mechanisms that the European Inquisitions never used, and especially not the Spanish one, which only used 3 types of torture: the potro, the toca, and the garrucha. Tortures were recorded carefully by secretaries. In fact, the Holy Office used a procedural manual that prohibited many forms of torture used elsewhere in Europe. Some of these, like the Iron Lady, most likely were never ever used as a torture mechanism anywhere. Too often, modernists romanticize the dark side of medieval times, which is an ongoing phenomenon. And obviously, those who are most vulnerable to fall victim to this kind of ignorance and falsification are children.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
What kind of an example are we setting?
I'm going to speak about the Inquisition Museum. The objective is to let you know what happened, who did it, and why. The chastity belt was a type of underwear that was worn in order to avoid sexual acts.
This belt was never used in the medieval times, and it is nothing more than an invention from the Romantic era of the 19th century, like many of those grotesque torture devices that are abundant in the museums of the Inquisition. When you go to a museum of the Inquisition, keep in mind that most of them are pure entertainment, and most of their stories should not be taken by face value, especially when we consider how often they are debunked. Imagine that you're in Disneyland, where the only thing that reigns is the imagination.
Things have been seen, like shadows, things that move. Dragging chains can be heard. Also in the back of the prison, there are many peers who can't stand being there in the dark. They found the bodies of the corpses whose spirits are manifested today. It is said a monk comes out of the church.
What do you think, Juan? And today, this palace is a museum. The workers there say the people in the exhibition see things, and really, there was no one around. It continues to be a mystery, and just like the story from before, they were inevitable.
Ghosts of the Inquisition.
Thank you.